Okay, we're going to get started, and thank you all again for all of your wise words this morning and bringing the messages that you brought to us this morning. I'm going to take these questions. They're not my questions, they're your questions. And we're going to just kind of one by one kind of filter those through. Some are going to be directed to individual folks up here on the panel, and some are going to be directed to all of us. So let's just get started. And Faith, you thought you were going to get a rest.
Okay.
Yours is the first one.
Should I repeat the question, or did they see it? Okay, they see
Everybody sees it.
Okay. I think part of the healing that we have to go through is that we have to remember that we were a complementary society. Nowadays, they'll say you're patriarchal or matriarchal. So the people that I come from, it was labor-based egalitarian, not strictly egalitarian. But so, like the anthropologists will say, oh, the buffalo hide was only women's work. You know what? If that buffalo hide was really hairy and heavy, I would make my brother carry it. So my brother had something to do with that hide. And so we did what we needed to do, and with the corn, and I know there's a difference with each tribal society, so you have to go to the roots of your society and find out what the original instructions were. But for us, it was complementary. There were men that did it. We had a Wozhu society, a corn planter society that men did, but also women did that. So it depended, I think, on the situation. And the food catches. One of the things that women did at this time that we're at right now, the men were out hunting, division of labor. We were creating food catches for the winter. So yes, we did have a lot to do with food.
Thank you so much, Faith. And the next question is to Devin, and I think we're going to just keep plowing through as many of these questions as we can.
Okay.
So Devin, and really to all of us, but Devin, we'll start with you. Should efforts to improve Native health and nutrition be differently organized for removed tribes? And everyone can read the rest.
Well, that's an interesting question because as you know, some tribes are still on their homelands or they're very close to their homelands, and they are still able to harvest some of the flora and fauna that they always have. But I think there's some commonalities, with all the tribes. Can that be sustained? Although that's a tricky word, as we were talking about. Are you going to be able to continue to harvest your wild rice? What are the problems that you might be facing with that? But tribes that are removed, they definitely have, I think, some real challenges because they've had to reestablish, is this a new homeland? It is a new homeland. So they may not have the same food resources that they had prior to getting to this new place. So, it's kind of a complicated question. Do you have anything else here?
One thing that comes to mind is when the Spanish introduced the peach, that spread like wildfire. Those are delicious. And so I'm not just saying that because I'm from Stratford, Oklahoma. No, if anyone's from Oklahoma, they know Stratford peaches. But I think that eggplant grows really well, and so I've culturally appropriated baba ganoush. It's what I can grow really well in my garden, and I grow tomatoes. We didn't grow tomatoes in North America, despite what some people may have been told. And so I think it's very traditional to grow what you like to eat and what can be stored, to be health conscious along the way.
But I think even if you still are on your homeland and you have access to your indigenous flora and fauna, you still have people who have health problems because they are choosing not to consume those items. So eating the wrong things is common, I think, around the country. And I think also just because you're on your homelands, maybe that doesn't mean you subscribe to your culture. So maybe the same challenges are inherent across, but maybe not as serious in some places as others. I think you'd have to go tribe to tribe individually and talk to people who actually live there.
I think my thought on that one is that's a perfect decolonizing effort because I just had opportunity to be on that water walk with Sharon Day. And heaven forbid she's Ojibwe. And so I've learned a lot from Sharon, and one of the things that we talked about was with our women's societies to bridge those old historical animosities and perceptions, and that came out of Standing Rock, is like we need to know about each other's medicines and plants and what can we share. So that's a decolonizing thing, because my thought is we probably did that a long time ago. It's not like we didn't come across other tribal women and men.
It wasn't like the National Geographic boundaries.
No.
We like intermarried
And there were the
shared.
trade fairs.
Yeah, the Chickasaws. I mean, we used bodark. Well, that doesn't grow in the homelands.
Right.
We traded with the Osage and the Wichitas. And
We have to remember that.
Yeah.
So Larry and Jamie, you want to take this next question and add to the previous discussion too, if you like, but how can indigenous agriculture adapt to climate change?
Go ahead.
One of the first things that comes to mind for me is something that Faith actually just touched on. There are some tribes in our region that are signing memorandums of agreement. So as particularly plant species shift and migrate with the changing climate, they're signing these memorandums of agreement to share their traditional knowledge with the tribes in the territories that they're shifting into, in exchange for being able to continue to harvest and to grow those particular plants. And so I think it's one way to really have a positive relationship with neighboring tribes and still be able to have access to particular plants that may be moving to new areas.
Yes, I think that's one of the, the problems of the reservation system is most of our resources come from a wider area than the reservation itself. And so because it become private property, state property, or federal property, we become isolated from it. And again, like what Jamie said, that we've had to take some of our areas, like our fishing areas, our hunting areas, and make them common areas within any number of tribes there, so that we could all have access to it. And it's encouraging us as tribal governments to work together with one another, rather than thinking about this is our primary area and other tribes got to stay out.
So Stephen, this next one is thrown to you. How can non-ag folks help stop the loss of biodiversity to bring some foods back?
Yeah, I mean, in some instances, it could be as simple as planting some of the native species in your landscaping, or maybe doing a butterfly garden. I mean, if y'all have heard of the butterfly effect, every shift in species richness and diversity is felt at a larger impact further down the food chain. So if we have something for the monarch butterflies to feed on along the way, planting that butterfly milkweed, which is really attractive, then that impact may not be felt in South America for a bird species that is relying on that as a food source.
Devin, this is going to you. And Ed, and if any of the other of you have burning things that you need to throw in, we're just going to offer these up as you feel the need to jump in. So, Devin, what are the parallels?
Well, people who were forced to remove, that's just what it means. They were forced. They didn't want to. They were still depending on their land and their resources, in their place. Some people, maybe they moved because, I don't know if you're talking about historically or today. Historically, maybe they saw better opportunities, or maybe this question is, you follow the herds. You have to move with the weather, move up and down the elevation depending on the time of year. So I'm not sure what the
one of the things that question brings to my mind, and I get this question a lot too, and as I move around, is how do we connect our urban cousins and brothers and sisters on this journey? It can't just be about remote communities, reservation communities. It has to involve our urban families. How do you do that?
We were all tribal not too terribly long ago, and I don't think that the access to quality nutrition and good food is solely an American Indian thing. So I mean, obviously, I'm stating the obvious. So some folks don't want to. Maybe they grew up eating deer and squirrel and rabbit, and they would really just prefer to eat beef and chicken. And that's how my great grandfather was. They grew up in the sticks, and when he got to Ada and had a home, that's the last thing that they never went camping or doing anything like that. So it's personal choice.
I have a comment. I think, again, sorry to get carried away on decolonization, but I think that one of the things that we've been taught is to isolate from each other. One of the earmarks is to be divisive towards us. So I think, remember that graphic where the borderland communities, like your community and my community, we need to come together and really look at Turtle Island as a whole and say we need to protect this together rather than just worried about my coast and my river, because we did traverse that back and forth. And so we have every right to be concerned about it. So I think that the borderlands over here, and that's what happened with the pipeline fights, it was these people, all of us, that were drawing attention to that. And so, and like the treaty rights, the fishing, that was from the borderlands community. So I think we need more of that, because we are constrained in the other arenas by federal grants, timelines, elections, and it stunts things that we could develop.
And I think our urban families are just as hungry for these connections as everybody is. And we've just got to, I think, Faith, you're right.
Call on us.
Remember all of us. We've got to do this together.
But part of the problem, though, is if you move away from your tribal lands, like the tribes in Oklahoma, then you're not going to be immediately qualified to get the resources that the tribe might be handing out. So if you're Choctaw and you move to Colorado, for example, the tribe isn't going to be sending you things. So how is it that you are going to find a way to stay connected to your culture and perhaps find a way to consume, your indigenous foods, if that's what you want to do?
When we look at the effects from the relocation program back in the 60s, where a lot of people, when they didn't have any opportunity in their home communities, drifted to the urban areas. And I think that what brings people together is ceremony. Mm-hmm. It is social events, playing sports. In Seattle, when we were all down there, part of the relocation program back in the late 60s and early 70s, it was basketball that brought us together. And anytime that tribes are going to get together, you're going to have sports and you're going to have food. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the commonality here, and this is what we see for those of us who travel for our tribes to different parts of the country. For these type of events, conferences, we're always have an opportunity to eat the local food that is there, to see what that is. So it's cultural sharing, and I guess that we say where we come from, if someone asks us to eat, we can't say no.
And oaks and oaks and oak. That's what it's like a botanist saying. So like if you if I go to Spain, I know what Quercus, the genus of oak tree, looks like, and a lot of y'all do too if you're familiar with oaks. They have acorns, they have lobed leaves, and the bark is very characteristic of that genus. And I think that there's also a great opportunity to utilize some of our ancestral foods, and even if we are displaced, because there's going to be some carryover, but very much like basketball and the eggplant, we shouldn't explicitly eat or think that we have to just stay in that one, corn, beans, and squash mentality, or I only eat wild rice because I'm from the Great Lakes. I mean, we don't do that anyways, obviously. So I think we miss out on a lot of cultural development and moving forward. I see a lot of communities that are, or community gardens or different projects that are like, we're going to grow it like this, and we're going to only grow these things. And I think that that's at a great disadvantage to our people.
So all of you, in turn, could you speak towards how settler colonialism impacts Indigenous communities today and how it impacts reviving how to be good relatives to each other and the plants. Faith, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think you have to have an understanding, first of all, of what settler colonialism is, and it's actually the weaponized framework that the U.S. government took in order to settle lands across Turtle Island. So the colonists became the weapon to take the land from us. So the idea that the government had of colonialism spread through the non-native people that came to our lands, and they're still doing it. And so in order for settler colonialism to be successful, we have to disappear. So keep that in mind. We have to disappear. So every time you see an effort to erase us, that's the call to battle. In schools, the urban area, what we should be doing, and we could be doing, is doing partnerships between urban youth and reservation youth. The reservation youth could just benefit so much of what's happening in this urban area, and vice versa. So we can't disappear, especially with each other. So I think that's really important. And it does impact on how we're good relatives. I think there's going to be a tipping point with the coming of meth on many of the reservations. We're going to need that urban community. Our people are devastated by meth. And so we need your help.
Devin?
Well, it's a complicated question and answer, because if you take a look at once again, I think you have to go tribe by tribe because they are different. Some of these tribes, there's factionalism, and there's so many different value systems within each tribe. And I think that sometimes tribes, here we go, we're talking about not wanting to insult anybody, but I think tribes are their own worst enemies at times. And I think that we have to be good relatives to each other, but we have to start within our own tribes. And because there's so many different value systems, and the tribal leadership, I think, has to be important with pulling everybody together. And, my tribe, for example, there's a lot of people worried about, why are we so fractured? And I think it's crucial that our leadership step in there, But I think it's up to grassroots movements, and I think it's up to the people who are very concerned to reach out to each other, not just members of your own tribe, but members of other tribes. And this is why Indigenous knowledge is so important, so you respect the natural world. The question is to each other and to the plants. If we don't respect each other, respect the natural world, we're not going to survive, because there's just too many other things that are going on right now, both internally and externally.
I think one of the few positive aspects of the reservation system today is that the reservation has allowed us to reduce our visibility and to increase our tribalism, to the idea that I think in Swinomish we know that if there's going to be nails sticking out, some white guy's going to come by and beat it down with a hammer. And so we kind of stayed out of sight, and we become very protective and very secretive about who we are with our neighbors. And for their fact that they thought we didn't have any strengths because we were quiet. But now they're starting to understand that there is strength there. And I think one of the things that we do in our community, when you have a strong traditional religion, that everyone in your community has a role to play. And so, and quite often I come from one of the smaller families in my community, but some of the work that I do in our spiritual circles, there's only a few of us that do it. So it kind of demands that some of those bigger families treat me with respect. And I think that as long as that we can do that, and to show respect to one another in our tribal communities, that's the only way that we're going to beat this colonialism. I remember a while back, a few years back, some academic tried to say it was post-colonialism, and it didn't last very long, because the tribal voices all got up and says, no, it's still continuing.
I think of intergenerational wealth, since I grew up from such since I had to start from scratch and raise my brothers and put myself through school and fight this whole way. my neighbors, the people that I'm competing with to expand my farm operation are multi-generational. They stole the land from my ancestors. They've got the best land, the best water. And so to get past that impact, it may take generations from a monetary or quantitative sense of the concept. I don't know, I'd like to believe that there's less racism. It seems to have really been spurred up lately, and there's quite a few folks in my community that won't sell land to outsiders. It's like, my family has been here since the 1800s, long before your family got here, and how dare you call me an outsider? So it's a challenge.
I think one frightening thing is, and I hope the fright of it causes, I don't know how many people are in this room, what would you say, maybe 200? Is that if all of you went home and made a commitment to realize how colonized you are, because we're all colonized. And so people who are colonized don't realize they're colonized. So when you step into spheres of leadership, you lead with what you know, and you were raised in a colonized system, a public school, and you're doing exactly what, and my daughter says this all the time. She said when the colonizers left, they made sure that they left patriarchs in the community to carry on the colonization process. And so that's all of you. And so what you have to do is take a hard look in that mirror and say, if I go into politics, I can't be sucking up to the conqueror. I can't be saying, oh, we can't lose, they've tried to revive the language, it's not going to work. That's an active colonizer-conqueror method. So we really have to shake our own cages and say, what part of me is so severely colonized? Because it's not just the leaders, it's us. Because you are a leader. And so some of them maybe in their lifetime are not going to be able to do that, but we still can do it in the grassroots. We can call on it. We can call it when we see it. Because if we don't, we live in the culture of silence, which is colonization. Is I'll sit in the back of the room all the time, and then I won't complain until I get in the hallway and I do the full-blown speech.
I've never done that.
I'll see you out there.
Yeah, right. I think we've got time for one more question for the group. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Who wants to tackle that one first?
Well, they did. They followed the herds, like I said, and they, depending on the weather, and also, if people could, the Comanches, for example, they followed the herds. Today, they cannot do that. Nobody can. You can't get on the horse and thunder across the plains going after the bison anymore. So here we are. Your reservations are set, but not every tribe has a reservation, but you still have your tribal land. So many of the resources that you might want are not on tribal land. So for example, if you want to go out and gather things, you want to go get pinon nuts, or maybe you want to go get walnuts or the mulberries or whatever, it might be on somebody's property. How is it that you're going to access that? How is it that you're going to get these things that you want and need? Is your tribe going to start farming these things? Do you have to go to the grocery store to get it? It's a really big question that we can't really answer here, I think, but there's...
I have a comment. I think that's, again, where we think out of tribal governments, and we kind of stay with tribal government, but we go over here in the creative thinking, because in our fight against the KXL pipeline, we began surveying land, and we found this one farmer. He owns 3,000 acres, and it's unbroken land. And when we were able to demonstrate to him all of these sites that he had in this area that was on a ridge, he was just blown away. And we were able to contact or impact him, and I think this was divine. Maybe it was creator-driven. he buried his son out there who had committed suicide. So the land was very special to him. So we said, our spirits are living with your son. And so what he's done is he asked me, he said, how could I preserve this 3,000 acres for the Indians to, and he said Indians, for you all to still worship? And I said, save it. And so what he did is he entered into a perpetual easement, and we just went up there. And now he's our decolonizing white farmer. So we're bringing in, we have a plan. We're going to bring all these white farmers into his land so he can decolonize. But I think there's creative ways you could do that.
In the Northwest, that there was 5 treaties in the state of Washington that were signed, and a lot of us in our treaties with the U.S. federal government said that we reserved the right to hunt and fish in all your used custom fishing areas. And so, again, that it allows our government to play a role to make sure that whether it's on federal land, state land, or private land, that we still have access. Right. We have access to these resources. And one of the things that I began to notice in our community is that sometimes after we lost ability to go in certain areas to gather the resources in that area, that our elders quit teaching about it. And so now, as we're doing the work that we're doing here now, sometimes we have to go back and try to regain that teaching. And how do you gather that resource? What are the prayers? How do you prepare yourself to go gather these resources in a good way? So I think in some ways that we've lost some things, but we're starting to gain those back again. And I think that's a good thing. It's a process. It's a process. And just as long as we keep going, we're going to find ourselves stronger as time goes by.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're still here. I don't think that was taken into account, right? They did their best to get rid of us, but we're still here.
So,
have to change the plan.
Larry and Jamie, can you close us out with this last question? Is your report an action plan applicable to other communities?
I would think so, yes. We've worked with the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals for several years. They have free or subsidized workshops all over the country where they work with tribes to develop their own reports. And we often sit on some of those teaching groups to work with tribes to develop whatever way they want. Or we're always open when people email us to reach out to us. That's happened a lot. And then we just go out to wherever you are, and whatever your context is or what it is that you want to work on, then we try to do the best that we can to help you create the framework to do it. And I think there's a lot of examples now. Swinomish was one of the first to do one, but I think there's a lot of examples across the country of tribes who have created their own that are very different from ours and fantastic. So I think there's a lot of models out there. But I would say, either freely contact us, or ITEP has a lot of resources as well.
When we took the IHIs, we took that to about 4 or 5 tribes in the state of Washington or in the Northwest, and Canada and Alaska, and then about 4 or 5 tribes nationally. So we took the concept and we took the very basic part of it and put it out there, and then allowed that way the tribes that we presented it to, they could take it and reform it with their own culture, with their own history, with their own resources in mind. So we used to warn them that what you see is a very basic and very simplified version of the work that we've done, but you can make it as complicated or as basic as you want to do it. So we think that the IHIs are a flexible document that can be used from a lot of different cultures and a lot of different peoples.
There's so much we can share with one another and really, not try to recreate over and over and over again. There's so much time and important work that needs to be done that should be done in a mindful, slow pace. But there's also so much that's out there that is usable and modifiable by other people. So my hat's off to you all for your work. So I just want to thank each one of our panelists this morning, and I think you do too. Larry and Faith are going to stay up here with us and be joined by 2 additional elders in just a minute. But could we please give a round of applause to our panelists?